There is a famous saying that says respect is reciprocal. How you treat others is how you will be treated in the long run. Jacob is a famous website designer who has done many excellent jobs for people. He was always profound at work. He hardly has time for himself or his wife. A successful man cannot fully achieve greatness without the help of a determined woman, they say. Jacob married a beautiful woman who had a long fit into his lifestyle. She loves him wholeheartedly. However, they both lack communication, which the wife has always complained about. Whenever she brought up the topic, Jacob's usual excuse for not keeping up was his job. The wife continued to bear this for her love for him. They had no children yet, as he was always too busy for her. Jacob has a couple of friends they grew up together, and their relationship, though far away but to a reasonable extent, was excellent. During a rare discussion with his friends, they decided it would be nice for them to meet up like old times and catch up with old-time stuff. Every one of them was so successful in their respective business lines, but it seemed only Jacob's family had been so unpleasant as they were the only ones without kids. He reluctantly accepted the get-together. The amazing thing was that it would take place in his house. He didn't see it as a big deal, so he never spoke to his wife about it or tried to ask for her opinion. She was not going to say no anyway, and it's my house, was his conclusion. His pride and ego were the significant problems the wife had to deal with since they were married. She learned about the get-together through her friend Helen, who happened to be the wife of Jacob's best friend, Mason. She was at first furious about the discovery that she wanted to confront Jacob out of anger, but as usual, she had consoled herself with the reason that Jacob might want to surprise her. She blushed over it and smiled at the lie she had just told herself. He finally told her casually on the day of the visitation, then headed out for the preparation without any further information about what the party should look like. A few hours was all that they needed for the preparation, as the sitting room had been converted to a party ground. Everyone loved the room's design and how she transformed the sitting room in no time. They all commended her creativity. She got nice compliments from the four families. She must have anticipated her husband's response, but to her greatest disappointment, he never said a word about it. The party started, and the families seemed to have a lot of fun as the men laughed and shared childhood memories. The atmosphere was filled with nostalgic moments. While the men talked and teased about their childhood, the ladies were about fashion and the latest trends in town. It was a beautiful moment filled with a lot of positivity and vibes. Not long after, the alcohol they took began to have the best of them. It was already affecting all of them. They decided to sit down and talk about how their lives had been. They decided to talk about each person's challenges and how best to help one another. Their union had a good purpose, and all of them kept talking about how wonderful their marriages had been and how they had been getting along all this while. Jacob's wife was jealous of them because she lacked most of the things they enjoyed in their marriages. When it was time for Jacob to talk, he ran his mouth and said many things about his wife. He belittled his wife and even concluded all she was good at was eating. He said she had been lazy, and he was the only one working and seemed to spend his money on unnecessary materials. All the guests in the room were so shocked and disappointed. Jacob didn't see a problem in what he did. He didn't understand how embarrassing that moment was for his wife. He kept nagging, and each time the wife tried to defend herself, he shut her up. His friends could not take it anymore, believing he needed to apologize instantly. He bluntly disagreed with them as his ego got the best of him. Mason's wife was the first to get off the party as she instructed her husband to follow her immediately. The other guys stood up with their families angrily and left. Mason, who was also on his feet, told Jacob he would regret being disrespectful to his wife soon. He apologized to Jacob's wife on behalf of Jacob and left with disappointment. Jacob was left with his wife. He still failed to acknowledge the fact that he embarrassed her. The wife could not hold back her tears as she ran into her room. Jacob, who didn't see anything wrong with what he said, kept sipping his alcohol and watching his favorite news channel. After all, he had the right to express himself. The wife wept profusely as she remembered everything she had put in place for the success of the get-together and how everything eventually ended, least expectedly. Many thoughts came flowing into her head, and she realized it was time for her to act. She was not going to take it anymore. She wiped her tears and got back angrily to confront Jacob. She had never confronted or challenged Jacob's authority before that moment. Jacob was astonished about his wife's uproar. Jacob slapped her twice and shut her up. The situation became very intense. Jacob's wife was a school teacher before she married Jacob. She wouldn't have agreed to marry him if she had noticed something like this when they were courting. She had her life back then. She had to quit her job after they married, as Jacob had instructed her to do. She still found it challenging to understand what she had done to deserve the ill treatment from her husband. How could he insult her like that in front of his friends? She busted into another round of tears, and even out of frustration, she just wanted to disappear from everyone. Jacob entered the room some minutes later. He jumped onto the bed and told her good night with no apologies whatsoever. She felt like killing him and then running away. She has never felt this way. All she has always done was love him and always do her best to bring out his best. Something rare to believe was the love she had for him. It was more robust than the ocean wave, but he kept hurting her pride and always saw her as nothing. She had always considered her husband's choice in every decision. She concluded all of those things have to stop regardless of what the outcome might be. The worst was going to be divorce. At least it was better than staying in this bondage called marriage. Her love set in again as she wished he could change. She concluded she would look for a new job the following day. She had to keep herself busy. She got a call from Mason early the following day. Mason knew Jacob better than anyone and was sure his pride would not let him apologize. He had always been like that, even at work, but he remained a vital part of the company's plan because he was among the few best in his department. After the call, she dressed up and left home. That was new, so it surprised Jacob, as she didn't clean the house or even make his breakfast. She never joked with Jacob's breakfast. Jacob entered the kitchen and prepared his breakfast himself. When he got to the kitchen, it looked untidy, all thanks to the get-together that didn't end well because he was telling the truth about his wife. He smiled when he remembered how Mason's wife reacted to the situation. He fumbled with the breakfast and even stained his clothes. That was his best, he growled. It wasn't difficult to secure another teaching job because of her past experiences and her intelligence in teaching. She soon found a job in mid-school and was to start work the following day. She stayed in a coffee shop down the street to reflect and strategize about her new job. Jacob did not seem to be himself at work. He managed to fit into everything, but it seemed nothing was clicking or connecting. He needed to talk to his wife, who had always been his companion. She always had the best advice for him whenever he was in an awkward situation. His time at work was eventually over, and he still felt uneasy. When he got home, everything remained as it was. He turned his face in anger. He didn't care if she was still angry. She has to give him a reason for not cleaning the house. She only had one job after all. He realized she was not even back yet from wherever she had gone. He became worried despite his act and pride. He loved his wife, even though his actions often countered that. He picked up his phone to call her, but she refused. She kept ignoring the call. She later decided to sleep in a hotel and plan what her new life would look like. No matter how much love, the moment the relationship started getting out of hand, it is better to walk away. Jacob could not meet up with how untidy the house was. He decided to clean up while waiting for his wife to return with a genuine excuse for abandoning her daily duty. Cleaning the house was one of the most stressful jobs ever. He washed the dishes and cleaned up. By the time he was done, the time was far gone. It was beginning to dawn on him that his wife was not coming back home that night. She was not even a night crawler. He began to have different thoughts in his head. He began to ask several rhetorical questions and kept soliloquizing as he picked up his phone to call his best friend, Mason. He explained the situation of things to him. Mason just replied, "Okay," and ended the call on Jacob. Jacob figured out he was still angry due to the previous day's outburst. He decided to go to bed. The night wasn't fair to him. His tummy would not let him rest. He was an ulcer patient. He needed to eat at least a bit before taking his medication. If she were available, she would ensure he was fine. She cared that much. Jacob survived the night. The following morning, he drove as fast as possible to the hospital to get treated. After 2 weeks, Jacob's wife was still nowhere to be found. He had looked around for her, and none of his friends were ready to help him. He lost focus at work and asked to take a break. His life became miserable in the space of weeks. Indeed, when you lose a good woman, you regret your actions. Jacob realized his mistakes and knew he had lost a jewel. He wished for another opportunity to apologize. When he was narrating how miserable his life had been in the short space of his wife's absence, he didn't know when he started crying. He could not even think of finding another woman. She was the best for him. Mason has been communicating with Jacob's wife since she left home, knowing her whereabouts. He had been paying for her hotel bills. He waited so long for the day Jacob returned to his senses. His friend's secret confession moved him. He told the wife about it and thought it was time for her to return home as Jacob learned his lessons. She initially insisted, but after constant pleas from Mason, she reluctantly accepted going back home. Mason and his wife have been good to her ever since that night. It was Mason's idea for her to leave the house in order to teach Jacob a lesson. When she knocked at the door, she was surprised to see Jacob had grown so unkempt. It was only 3 weeks, but he looked so wasted. He seemed to be doing more drinking than eating and sleeping. She blamed herself for leaving him like that, but she figured out the space was needed so he could learn his lesson. Jacob could not hide his surprise. He jumped at her like a baby and kissed her. She was so excited by his move. He instantly went down on his knees to apologize. He even made a vow never to do something like that again, as he realized how important and how impactful she had been to his life. She hinted about her new job, and Jacob was excellent with that. She continued her work, and they both agreed it was high time they had kids. She taught him something great. You can't treat someone like a pinch of salt and expect to be carried like a bag of rice. Indeed, respect is reciprocal, no matter a man's status or position. He has no reason to disrespect or belittle a woman, especially his wife. Jacob was lucky his wife decided to give him a second chance. Not everyone will be as fortunate as Jacob. This is why you must start treating your woman with respect, beginning from this moment.
"How dare you, reckless woman!" the man shouted aggressively. Listen. The woman raised her shaky voice to justify, but the situation made her shout down. She was devastated, with tears rolling down her cheeks and terror in her eyes. Looking at this man, she was about to end a fight, but who knows that the only thing that will come to an end will be their relationship. Unknowingly, the man raised his hand over his wife in front of his friends. Initially, a loud chattering among people began, leaving his woman sobbing on the floor. The woman was devastated, lying on the floor with a heavy heart and a shaky voice. Weeping and gathering, she stood back on her feet and rushed back to her room. Locking herself in the room, there was the deadliest silence. A happily married couple lives on 183 North Street in Seattle. In their happily married life, there was something that turned their lives into a hella tragic end to their love, commitment, and charm. Just like the regular days, the wind was fine with glittering sunlight and gliding colors in the sky. "This is the perfect time to cook teriyaki with some marinara sauce. Susan will love this," Mary said to herself with a kind smile on her face. She went straight into the grocery store and gathered the essential ingredients for the kitchen. Susan is the dearest husband, the love of her life, a tall Italian man with a sharp nose and dark brown eyes with a heavy voice. He was an entrepreneur of real estate in Seattle. Besides his incredible interest in business, he was an extroverted person who loved partying and meeting new people. Among his people, there was an extraordinary person. The only one made for him was a blonde American beauty with huge glittery eyes and an innocent smile that could kill anyone. Susan was a businessman who fell in love with pastry chef Mary. In the cold breeze of September 2016, the couple tied the knot to cherish their love and dignity. This was the first time they were moving into their new home, where they would likely meet their children and were going to spend their whole life devoted to their affiliation and family. Susan and Mary were quite enthusiastic about starting a family together. They have always dreamt of having a daughter like Mary, a blonde-haired baby with pretty green eyes. Both were enjoying the best days of life in their lavish home, decorated with love beside the river. The birds chirping in the garden assembled the positive energy around their home. Setting apart their convenience, the couple decided to settle down away from the busiest town of the city. By now, their home was in Riva. The couple has to take a long drive to meet their professional tasks. From Riva to Seattle, it was about 80 miles of distance. As Riva was a small town, and by that time, the concept of public transport was non-existent. Mary was cooking the meal with her love. It was the anniversary, and she was pregnant. She prepared a surprise for her husband and invited his mates and colleagues for a festive dinner. A helper named Ella preparing for the festive night. It seemed that the couple was in love, and the one we call an ideal couple. But behind the doors, the story is quite different. Mr. Susan is an unapologetically romantic narcissist who constantly manipulates his dear wife to believe in his extramarital affairs. One night before, there was a gruesome argument among them. Susan told his wife there was only one witness to the whole incident, helper Ella. Dabbing the door, Susan left home and went back to his mistress. Ella stood forward to look after Mary. The door was open, and Ella entered saying, "Is everything fine?" she asked hesitantly. "How can it be?" Mary replied, while turning her face towards the window in the room. There was silence, as Mary wasn't in the mood to express her thoughts. The next day, she was enthusiastic about getting her husband back to him by planning a surprise dinner with a baby. Ella was happy to see her like that, but she knew that Susan was a terrible kind that would gradually deteriorate his wife's peace for pleasure. The night was festive as planned, and Susan was just fine. Everyone on the feast was piling their plates with mesmerizing meals and hands full of champagne. People's laughter and chatting in the air seemed perfectly fine. Mary dressed herself accordingly to the great night. She chose a red gown, and her blonde hairs were braided wonderfully, with a minimal makeup look. It seemed that Susan was going to see her for the first time. He looked at her from a quiet distance, but he could smell her scent. Suddenly there was a call, and Susan went to attend to it. On his way back, he went pretty frustrated when he saw his dear friend using his flirtatious tricks to impress his beloved wife. He rushed towards them and grabbed his wife quite aggressively. "There was nothing like that," she uttered. "I don't want to hear from you," Susan replied in a pretty antagonistic tone, and he began to yell at his dear friend named Max. Max tried to defend himself, but Susan was not in his senses. To put the fight to an end, Mary came in between them. Suzanne raised his hand over his dear wife and dragged her to the floor. This was the first time his terrible behavior towards his wife was on the front stage. The night ended with a terrible memory, and Mary left home early in the morning. Suzanne was lying on the couch with a heavy head and wasn't in a position to conclude what happened last night. Stepping into the bedroom searching for Mary, he found a written note. "I am leaving. Mary." Suzanne didn't bother and assumed everything would be fine, and she would return home in a few days. But who knows what gonna has happened? Mary was 2 weeks pregnant, and Suzanne missed the chance to get to know about the arrival of their baby. Instantly, he felt a sense of freedom, that he could have many nights with mistresses and no one would bother him. Days went on and something was kicking him inside. He felt very heavy inside, and it seemed there was a quiet burden over his shoulders. But what exactly was it? He was trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, Mary shifted to her old apartment and began her career as a professional pastry maker. Time went on, and there was a hollow space left behind. Hounding the house, he was missing his dear wife. There was a deep hollow in his heart. Gradually, he cut himself from his mistress and missed the outgoing plan. Day after another, he was getting homesick. He was suffering from an explosion of negation and guilt. He was pretty apologetic over his behavior. He remembers those days when he shut his wife down for his evil mistress who was after him for his money, but his wife was the only one who loved him, with her kind heart. By this time, his social and emotional health was quite disturbed. Getting locked in the house, Suzanne sensed the scent of his dear wife, and he reached a state where he began to experience the illusions of his wife while baking his favorite pastry for him. The condition of Mr. Suzanne was not quite appealing. Taking a view of the whole situation, Ella informed Mary about her terrible state with Suzanne. Mary hung up the phone, and it seemed she didn't even bother. One day, working at the bakery, Max came to meet Mary. He told her that she should move on with the baby. This was an awful statement, and Mary wouldn't expect that. She was pretty surprised and asked him to leave immediately. Taking a view of the whole situation, Max's intentions towards the Dovebirds are suspicious. He was in love with Mary and always wanted to show her her husband's true face. On the next day, Suzanne received a parcel with a note. Reading the letter made him frustrated, and he left home right away. Driving hastily to the hospital, it was Mary who was going to give birth to their one and only child. Mary hid our child. How cruel she was. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Suzanne reached the city hospital, and Mary was already in the operation theater. Soon, he was accompanied by Mary's best friend, Vinny and Max. The crew was waiting to look after the mama and the baby. Everyone was praying for their health and safety. The doctor said that due to the stressful pregnancy, there was a significant risk during the delivery. Suzanne went straight to the church, praying for the safety of his dear wife, and paid a promise that he would watch his tone and behavior. He wants his wife and child back. He was trembling and shaking, and for the first time, he was seen in such a state of longing for the essential thing in his life. Vinny approached Suzanne and told him that everything was fine. Stepping into the room, he heard the crying of their baby daughter and saw his Mary lying on the bed. "You are a warrior. I missed you. Can you forgive me for everlasting happy life?" he said. "So you missed me. Asking for forgiveness is not your way," Mary said to him. The guilt on his face described the whole story. Realizing a partner's importance is an essential part of our life. Sometimes we should leave our ego behind to save our relationship. Redemption is the only way out.
Lois has stayed at an orphanage home ever since she was a baby. She was seen by the roadside near the grocery store and taken to the orphanage home until she was old enough to take care of herself. Since she left, her life has been nothing short of a roller coaster. No help was forthcoming, as no one was willing to adopt her, as they all complained that she acted weird. Everyone that came to adopt her was sure to come back to return her. This must have been because she grew up as a loner. She lived a very private life as a little girl and could pass for a chronic introvert. This was not something any of her wards could cope with. Lois is a young teen with a lot of potential, and she lives on government stipends, as that was the only way she could continue her education. However, as adulthood hits, responsibilities get heightened, and the government stipends could only solve some of her expenses. She decided it was time to go outside the box in the quest to survive. She thought it would be wise to get a side hustle. "I just hope I get the job," she said to herself as she took her bicycle and rode down the road for an interview she had seen the previous day. While still lost in her thoughts of what to expect at the interview, Lois got carried away that she accidentally collided with a mini ice cream store not too far away from the company she was heading to for an interview. She quickly got off the ground and apologized to the man she had just hit. This man managed to stand up from the floor. He was knocked on with a rage in his eyes. He didn't look like he was going to take it, as he looked so furious. He wasn't expected to smile anyway. That was his business that just got ruined. It was at this point Lois knew she was in deep shit, a big one at that. Is it not enough that she's poor? Now, She's even in debt. She was sure her stipends wouldn't be enough to sort the unexpected bills. All she could do at this point was to plead with the man to look for an easy and fast way that she could pay him. Since she was an orphan off to get a job, she suggested the man hire her on a contract until she could cover the debts. The man seems not to be moved by her words. He brought out his phone immediately without commenting on Lois's request. He placed a call through to his friend, who is an accident lawyer. "Hey man, I need your help. Come to my base right now," he said over the phone, and in no time, a young man with a briefcase who should be in his 30s approached Lois and the man. Lois thought it must be the lawyer this man earlier called for a second. The lawyer grinned at Lois like all was well. Lois knows she's in for a long one. She decided to negotiate with the lawyer, an expert on such a case. In a more pleasant but baritone voice, the lawyer said to Lois, "Hello, miss. You have to pay at least 70% of the things you've damaged, else you might be charged to court. Besides, you are of age," he said bluntly. Lois swiftly went to her knees because she didn't want to go to jail. The lawyer smiled softly when he realized she was scared of what might be the outcome of everything. He recognized her fear, decided to capitalize on it, and ensured every of Lois's details was taken and followed up immediately. Lois went back home as she was unable to go for the interview because of the incredible saga. She kept calling the lawyer as she thought he could tamper justice with mercy and pity a poor orphan girl like her. After a few days to cool off, she went on to get a side hustle, since the man won't hire her to pay him. She worked hard, but the accident lawyer was collecting everything from her, making her life a mess. She could barely feed herself. When she felt she had paid enough, the lawyer appeared at her doorstep and threatened to charge her to court if she did not produce another certain amount. Something she never wanted was to be assigned to court at a young age, as she feels that will be a forever stigma on her personality. Lois doesn't want to be tagged as an ex-convict. The fear of being jailed, which was planted inside her by the lawyer, grew more robust, and the matter was getting out of hand as she was beginning to lose her cool due to frustration and the frequent visitation of the lawyer in her small apartment. Still, she continued to pay up every time he showed up. The lawyer would intimidate her and put pressure on her. She tried to get help, met people, and looked for a way around him, but there was no success, as it seemed the lawyer had experience on his shoulder. She had to double her side hustle to meet his demands, but the lawyer never seemed tired of returning. Her frustration hit its peak. She felt she could no longer bear it. She confronted the lawyer and told him she was done paying him, as it seemed he was extorting her. The lawyer loved the challenge, as it was his time to flaunt his prowess and intimidate Lois. He brought out some fake documents of how much she had paid and how much she had left to pay. Lois, however, wasn't patronizing him this time, as she shook her head in disagreement. She knew she had paid over double of what she was shown, but the lawyer won, as he was able to maneuver her with his regular statement, but this time in a super crafted and compelling way. "Dear Lois, I'm only advising you like an elder brother. You have to keep paying to avoid the case getting to court. Any judge will not take it lightly, and I am only helping you so you don't end up being arrested or going to jail, as you are above 18. Lois silently cursed herself for being of age, as the last statement always gets to her head. The rage of anger flowed freely in her body as she looked at the lawyer in the face bitterly, with so many thoughts running through her head. She continued to be a slave to her ignorance. It was already telling on her academics, as she now misses classes and has no time for the classes missed. She was always busy trying to meet the lawyer's payday to avoid going to jail. After a long while of being fooled, she decided to take the bold step of visiting the ice cream man's shop to ask him personally how much more she had to pay. The man hit his kiosk with her bicycle. To her most excellent amusement, the ice cream vendor was no longer at that location. She could locate him after asking about the whereabouts of the residents. She asked the question and was shocked after the man told him she had paid up for a long while. This time it dawned on him that the lawyer had only been extorting her to sort his bills. She was furious and promised to fight back most wisely. She thanked the ice cream vendor for being honest. She headed to a bar to cool off as she figured out a plan. "He will surely go down for this," she said as she gulped the remnant of her drinks and dashed out of the bar. She became very regular in a law library. She started reading about laws that guide accidents. She realized she had only been dancing to his tune all this while. When she knew she was ready, she came up with a plan on how to make him pay for messing with the wrong person. She smiled at her progress and never ruled out that she could have done better from the beginning. She promised that was the last time anybody would ever cheat her, as she now knew her rights. She pledged to implement her discoveries at any necessary time. Another payday had come, and the lawyer had come for his upkeep. Lois handed him the money. She then asked for her payment account, as she would also love to have a copy with her to monitor how much she has been paying. That surprised the lawyer, as he reluctantly handed her a copy, leaving them in disbelief. "This girl is beginning to grow wings," he muttered as he approached his car. Lois went to the bank for her statement of account and noted the number of times she has been paying what she now refers to as forever debt. She repeated the payment 5 more times and decided it was time for the lawyer to face the law. The lawyer came as usual, but only to meet an unusual Lois. She is now bold, and luckily the lawyer is too greedy to realize her plans. He threatened the court and how her life would be ruined soon, and promised to return with a letter from the court, as he was going to file a case against her and make sure she faced the law. His words no longer moved Lois. She told him to bring it on. After what seemed to be a long week of waiting for the lawyer's court letter, nothing came forth. He must have realized the new development. He tried his best to stay away, which did not please Lois, as she was hoping to make him face the law for taking advantage of her weakness. The hunter became haunted by the case, as Lois eventually filed a lawsuit against the lawyer. He was shocked to receive such a letter and had no choice but to appear in front of the law. Lois looked for more victims of the same or similar case whom the lawyer had jilted. She planted a decoy who had trailed and secretly observed the lawyer's movements for the past weeks. She got a lawyer, and with the evidence at her disposal, she was about to win him after being represented well by her lawyer. With the revelation of the ice cream man, she had gained his trust and showed all the wrong side of the lawyer he once referred to as a friend. The ice cream vendor was disappointed to find out the truth, which was his reason for testifying against his lawyer friend. He said, "Irrespective of our friendship and what we share, honesty comes first." The lawyer was found guilty of all the accusations charged against him. His license to practice as a lawyer was revoked, and he was made to pay back most of the money he extorted from the people, and was also given a 5-year jail term to serve as a lesson to other desperate opportunists like him. Lois was pleased with the court's judgment as she went home happily. Her interest in becoming a lawyer had grown even more, and she promised to study law after her first degree. The lawyer regretted underrating the young teen. He regretted letting his greed get the best of him, as there were obvious signs he neglected. He regretted not taking the proper precaution in a bid to solve the minor accident that has now led to him losing his career to what he failed to do right. He promised to be a better person once he came out of jail. Karma caught up with me big time, he said as he was escorted into the police van with handcuffs. What an embarrassing moment. Lois getting paid back half of what the lawyer had extorted from her was the most exciting part of her decision. She decided to use the money to nurture her academics. She continued her life but stood by her decision to always bring to justice anybody that tried to intimidate her or anyone that used the law for a corrupt purpose. Justice will always prevail. No knowledge is lost. The more you know, the more you progress. Lois lay on her bed thinking about the event of the day as she took a relief sigh. A part of her felt for the lawyer, who is now a prisoner for failing in his responsibility as a lawyer and a defender of the law. But above all, she is happy justice was served. Sometimes in life, love is all it takes to do the extraordinary, and frequently, love without money is bound to end in the trash bin. Alex is a young guy trying to balance his financial life and relationship. After a very hot argument that didn't settle well with his self-esteem, he decides to work off-limit for the lady he loves. If you are not man enough, I will walk out of this relationship, were the constant words of his girlfriend. The statement keeps ringing in his head as he walks through to Mr. Joe's store in an attempt to beg him for a position in his store. After what seems to be a long thought by Mr. Joe, he finally decides to find him a space. Work started fine, and Alex could not ask for more. He was grateful to Mr. Joe for his kind gestures because, since he started making some cash for himself, his girlfriend has stopped nagging about his lack of taking up responsibilities. He doubts that his girlfriend might not be loyal to him in the relationship, but that was just by the way. His heart has chosen this lady and would continue to beat for her. He assured me to continue to do everything possible to see their work and invest in their growth. They have been together for 3 years. On a fateful day, while he was walking down to his house after a stressful day at work, the uproar of some group of bad boys who were trying to raid Mr. Joe's store stole his attention. Alex, who has attempted severally to get into the military force on multiple trials, decided to stress out his little military skills on these guys. Fortunately, he was able to save Mr. Joe's goods and even nabbed 2 of the burglars, and they were handed to the police for further investigation. Mr. Joe was surprised at Alex's braveness and admired his patriotism towards him and his possessions. Following his satisfaction towards Alex, Mr. Joe promoted him from just a worker in his store to his right-hand man, his little way of rewarding him for his loyalty. He started to favor Alex. He took him everywhere and showed him the depth of his business. Anyone could easily mistake Alex for Mr. Joe's son. After a few months, Alex's relationship begins to flourish unexpectedly. True is the saying that love is sweet, but becomes sweeter when money is involved. He starts to buy stuff for his girlfriend and pays most of her bills. Everything seems normal in their lives and in Mr. Joe's store, too. Everyone is happy. All staff now accord Alex the same respect they regard Mr. Joe. Alex was seen knocking on Mr. Joe's office door. A voice from the office asked that he comes in. He entered Mr. Joe's office. The office was massive, with many noble awards hanging on the shelf directly across Mr. Joe's office seat. That was Alex's first time in his office. According to the workers, Alex was the first staff who entered Mr. Joe's office, as he only hosts some suited men who come only once in 3 months for meetings. Alex imagines his boss as a god in human form. He is mild and always seen smiling and filled with top-notch business ideas to keep his store the best in the city. Alex has come to see Mr. Joe for something important. He wants to plead with him to show him the strategic ways he has threaded to attain this high level so he can build a castle next to his bosses. He firmly believes this will work since he loves him like his son, and he's able to gain his trust over the months. Alex was surprised when Mr. Joe told him he's always been thinking about him lately. He's been planning to involve Alex in his deals. If you decide to work for me, I will be happier because I've seen you as part of my plan. However, if you don't, perhaps that might be the end of our deals and works together, Mr. Joe said to Alex. The statement makes Alex so curious. He promises to do whatever it is, as it is a great privilege for him to learn from a business tycoon like Mr. Joe. Mr. Joe was impressed by Alex's response and determination to change his life. Mr. Joe reveals the unbelievable to Alex. He opens up to him that he is a drug dealer and has been able to amass all his wealth from the money he has made with this shady business, and he will help Alex achieve the same if he is ready to work with him. He will be willing to let Alex work with him so he can put his military experience into work and get paid hugely for every successful mission. Alex is surprised by the discovery, making him disappointed as he turns to walk out on Mr. Joe in anger. How can someone I look up to and call a mentor be this shady? He kept thinking. He went home and could not sleep. The thought of disappointment filled his heart, and he was really down that he failed to go to work for 2 days and also failed to eat anything. As a result of the disappointment, his girlfriend began to notice this in no time. She said, "Alex, I hope you have not left the work as you always do, you loser. I will walk out of your life if you resume being miserable. I'm still staying because you've been making some cash lately." She stormed out of the house. Alex was then left with the thought of his relationship going down because of his lack of decision. He will live up to expectations if he takes the deal, was his final thought as he pulls out a new pair of clothes and walks toward the direction of work. After minutes of contemplating going into Mr. Joe's office, he enters the office. Mr. Joe is more than excited to see Alex and even offered drinks. They marry while the staff is left wondering what they might be celebrating. Later that day, Mr. Joe analyzes the scope of the business and gives Alex his first mission. Alex took it up from there and went to the meeting point to deliver the work in a grand style, leaving no traces. Everything seems perfectly planned out. Mr. Joe was more impressed with the outcome of what appears to be his best mission so far. This raises the beginning of another dimension in the life of the youngster. Within a few weeks, Alex got his first car, but still decided to lay a low profile as instructed by Mr. Joe, his strong backbone. Mr. Joe has executed many people in the line of business for the growth of his own business on the call and order from the giant monster himself. Mr. Joe has created fear in him that he knows better than to try anything funny with the new beast he discovered in Mr. Joe. The penalty is death, as many have fallen in such accord. Anything for my baby gave Alex the motivation to do more, and he did not stop to shower her with gifts and money, which she still always requests as she has become even more extravagant in her spending, something he never checkmated in the course of the relationship due to the fear of losing a lovely lady. Alex embarked on a deadly mission that might end his life, but he could not complain because he had seen what the monster himself had done to people that failed to carry out his orders. And to fight the monster, you must train yourself to be a monster. Joe was tired of the life he was forced to take out of his love for his girlfriend. He decided he was going to end his connection with Mr. Joe and would live a free man life again. After a series of thoughts and imagination, he found a fantastic way to betray Mr. Joe. He outsmarted Mr. Joe, and the monster was killed in the deal, all thanks to Alex. The question about life is always, what next? He decided to put the money he got into good use for himself, reducing everything for his girlfriend, who was of very high taste. "You piece of shit, you are so dumb, and you can never be enough for me," were her words as Alex stopped caring about her luxurious lifestyle to focus on his dreams. He stood his ground. The girlfriend slapped him for refusing to give her what she asked him. She broke up with him and threatened that he would run back to her in no time. When we work with determination, we tend to achieve the unbelievable. Alex began to pick his life from scratch and tried so hard to be a better person. Good things don't come by easily, he thought. He started a coffee shop and he employed a few professionals to work for him. He has met his girlfriend several times and wished he had her back due to his love for her. He began to wonder if he would ever find a worthy replacement. He blamed himself for pushing too hard to impress a lady that was a gold digger and promised himself the following relationship was going to be better. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. He is so much into his work that he hardly has time for himself or any woman. On a fateful evening, after a stressful day at work, he decides to take a walk around the street to his apartment. He saw a group of boys trying to harass and molest a cute young girl with blonde hair and a fantastic body. He ran in the direction and engaged the boys in a fight. He overpowered them, but he sustained some heavy blows on his cheeks. The poor girl locks eyes with Alex, smiles, and thanks him with an intent expression. Alex was dumbfounded by her soft voice. She is indeed a cute creature. He couldn't say a word. He vowed to himself that he would not search for or think about her. He doesn't want to fall victim to a gold digger again. It didn't take long for Alex to reverse his decision to search for her. After so many attempts to meet her, Alex finally got to see her again. They had a long, pleasant conversation and exchanged contact with a smile. One would wonder if they won a lottery. The young lady worked in a restaurant nearby and was doing fine for herself. Her personality and approach to matters were not unnoticed by Alex, who could not help but like her repeatedly. The two became so close that one would mistake them for a couple. Finally, he asked her out, and they started a relationship. She is respectful and also playful, a different version of his ex-girlfriend. They both work hand in hand for their future right before them. He was in his office on a fateful afternoon when he heard a knock, and to his surprise, his ex-girlfriend was seen standing in front of him, looking different, quite unkempt, and looking like a beast beat her. She explains her situation to him and begs him to take her back, but he cannot help but burst into laughter as he recounts what she made him go through. She sincerely apologized, and Alex forgave her. He gave her money and told her about his wedding coming up soon, though he had no plan for a wedding at that moment. That was his way of making her understand that he had moved on. She reluctantly collected the money to start up a new life. Even though he was over her, he could not help but pity her because of the troubles she had faced, especially how she was treated like a sex slave by the man she left him for. There was no doubt she might be affected by diseases, one that might equally end her life. The rest of the day went well, as he anticipated the nightfall when he would ask his girlfriend to marry him and become the mother to his unborn children. It went as planned, and even heaven knows he is lucky to finally find someone deserving and lovable despite his imperfections. He learns a lesson that he doesn't have to work off limit for anybody to satisfy the person or make the person stay. As a fact, love should not be based on money only. I'm glad she ended things with me. She made me find the best woman ever. He smiled as he wrapped his arms around his new girl. He pecked her on the forehead while she blushed and smiled. Things were never smooth for Jack and his mom. Jack was an artist from birth, and he lost his father when he was just a kid. He grew up in the hands of his mom in a single-room apartment. They were their neighbors themselves, as no one in the neighborhood wanted to associate with them. Jack's mom, Ms. Jane, had gone from one menial work to another to put food on the table for herself and her poor son. She often joined combined 3 works in a day to provide for his autistic son, who she had earlier enrolled in one of the best schools in the city. Her neighbors often laughed and made fun of her for being poor and having expensive taste. They talked behind her back as they were awed why she had decided to send her son to the almighty St. Hallmark's amongst all other affordable schools where her caliber often sent their kids. After several unanswered questions from these busybodies, they challenged Miss Jane about why she had to risk all that for her kid. In her words, she replied to her critics by saying, "Even though I'm poor, I wouldn't want my son to grow up in the circle of the mediocre. Growing up and mixing with the kids of the rich will help my son build a sharp mindset toward money and have a better connection that will eventually help him in the future. I wouldn't mind working all around the clock to give my son the best." Some of these critics saw some sense in the reason behind her actions, while some called her dumb and criticized her further. Ms. Jane seemed unbothered as she still ran 3 to 4 jobs to achieve her dream for her son. She had 1 full-time job and 2 part-time. She was a full-time janitress. She always resumed work as early as 6 a.m. and close around 5 p.m., granting her the rest of the day to settle down for her other jobs. Who said it was easy? It was never easy. Sometimes she missed sleep as she had to prepare for the next day. She had to take care of her autistic son and prepare his meal before he left for school. Jack was a term in high school. His experience had been terrific as he wasn't getting any fun from school. He was bullied every day by his classmates. This must have been because of his health conditions and his mom's financial status. He came from a different world from the other students. They avoided him like the plague. He tried making friends with them, but they knocked him in the head or kicked him in the ass, yelling at him to stay away from them. He soon started isolating himself. As if that was enough for these bullies, they still went for him in his isolation. They would drag him and make jest of him for being physically impaired. They laughed at him because his mom was a janitor in a small company down the road, and she had to sponsor his education with the stipends she was earning. Their teacher witnessed their callous and uncultured acts towards the poor Jack, and she chastised them for it. She asked that they apologize to him and never try such again. Jack felt so bad about the ridicule his classmates and schoolmates generally made out of him. He was pained to the bone marrow. He wanted to change the narrative. He felt so pissed with himself and concluded he wouldn't let himself remain public trash where everyone dumps insults, and for his poor mom, he was going to do something. Jack decided to go out all to make life better for himself and his mom, and at least stop being a piece of mockery, and most significantly, stop his mom from working as a janitor. That was his utmost drive. He started working. He tried to sell his services. In the bid, he became a freelancer online since he had learned some skills on YouTube. The design had always got his attention, and he breathed it. Even in his subconsciousness, or whenever he was lost in his thought, he would draw on the ground with his index finger, trying to craft a new design. His classmates called him weird for that, so he took his time to learn it extensively. He became very good at it, and his talent had just met professionalism. He started selling his skill on freelance websites and making some cool cash. He was ecstatic the day he got his first project. He couldn't hold his joy as he jumped without bothering about his condition. Tears flowed down his cheeks like a baby. You would think he was just declared the next president of the U.S. The project was just a $10 work. It was small, but he didn't mind. It was not really about the money to him, but the fact that he could get hired and paid afterward swept him off his feet. When his mom returned, he quickly ran to her and hugged her. The mom was shocked to have seen her son happy again after the tough times he had been going through in his school. She couldn't help but wonder what had got Jack very pleased, but she sure knew there was a reason behind his strange happiness. In a keen voice, she asked him, "My baby, what is it?" Jack told his mom about the good news, and he promised to make sure she stopped working as a janitor. He executed the project diligently, and he was rewarded soon. He got another work after a week. This time it was $50. He was convinced this was the pace setter for him and his mom. He pleaded with his mom to quit her full-time job while he took care of them. However, he tried to calm him to take things slowly. She would stop eventually, but it wasn't time yet. He wasn't pleased with his mom's decision, but gave in after several persuasion from the mom. 6 months down the line, Jack had been able to amass thousands of dollars. He was able to do this with his beautiful creativity and hard work. He had sleepless nights and sometimes missed school to meet up with deliveries. He didn't touch his earnings. He saved them on this trusted website. But the unexpected happened. The website crashed and he lost all his hard-earned savings. Jack became depressed. This didn't seem too good for Jack. He grew lean within a few weeks as he wouldn't eat but cry all night. His mom consoled him, but he wasn't getting all of that. All he wanted was a miracle. He wanted his money. He had too many plans for the money. That was the money he had planned to establish his mom with. He felt so discouraged. Building and nurturing a new account from scratch wasn't a quick bone to break. The market got competitive by the day. He had no access to any of his top clients again, and he had no way to reach them as they only transacted on the website, as that was the policy. The platform promised to kick back and pay up every freelancer affected by the unfortunate technical problem. Jack waited about 2 months to get a response from them, but nothing seemed forthcoming, and every action to reach out to their customer support was futile. Jack accepted his fate and decided to channel his determination towards something else. This time, he started working for a logistics company. He helped people clean up their apartments and got paid stipends, and he did this for months, even though it wasn't advisable for his health. His mom warned him to stop because of his health status, but Jack was too determined to stop her mom from working as a janitor and raise cash again so he could establish her. Unfortunately, his mom became ill. She was diagnosed with complications because of stress and the humid, filthy places she was working. She was forced to stop working as a janitress, at least pending the time she recovered. They had to keep her on medications to aid her recovery. Drugs were expensive, and hospital admission was more expensive. Jack spent all the money he had saved on her mom's health so she could be okay again. He exhausted everything he had. He had to double his hustle to keep the mom fine and save her from dying. He decided to add delivery work to his cleaning job. This time, he had to combine academics with his 2 challenging jobs. He would rush to school every morning after having a short sleep. He would leave school before the usual time to resume his cleaning. He would joggle his schedule to meet up with clients' deliveries. Sometimes he delivered late and got several lashbacks from their clients. The company he was working for had sanctioned him twice and threatened that on the third strike he would be dismissed. In the run to save his mom, trying to see her mom get back on her feet, Jack faced some health problems, nervousness, and panic attacks. He was weak and vulnerable. The health problems were highly expected. An autistic guy like him shouldn't stress himself too much, but Jack couldn't help. He had responsibilities on his shoulder. His mom asked him to stop worrying about her and that she would be fine. The doctors restricted him from working. This is the end, he thought, as tears dropped in his eyes. The doctors supervised Jack for 1 week to ensure that he didn't sneak to work behind their backs. After a week, he got a bit better and returned to the company he was working for. Sadly, the company hired someone to take his place since he was absent for a week with no upfront notice. He tried explaining to them that he had been ill and was under strict orders not to leave the hospital, but they weren't patronizing him. After a lot of pleas, he had to leave there with shame. Tears had gathered around his eyes and blurred his sight as he walked like a helpless beggar. He also rammed into a car that was coming without even noticing. The man's honking at him brought him back to reality. The man cursed him and went his way. Jack couldn't even pick a fence because he was the one at fault. He walked down to the hospital where his mom was admitted. As he got to the hospital entrance, he slipped and slumped, hitting his arm hard on the floor. Immediately, he lost consciousness. The nurses ran towards him and rushed him into the emergency ward, a different ward from his mom's. After a few hours, he sneezed from his deep sleep and opened his eyes. The doctors calmed him down and assured him everything was okay. They handed him the handkerchief and his phone that had fallen off his back pocket after he slumped. He asked about his mom, and they told him she was sleeping, and she didn't even know about what had happened to him. He collected his phone. He noticed he had missed calls from his mom and a mail notification displaying on his phone lock screen, but ignored the mail. He unlocked his phone to call his mom and assure her he was fine. Having unlocked his phone, he could read the mail's headline. Surprisingly, it was from the freelance platform he was working with and had all his savings stuck in after they experienced a severe technical setback. The headline read, "Hi, dear Jack, we are back, and we are stronger." He was astonished. He quickly clicked the mail to read up on everything. Yes, it was that great news he had been waiting for. He quickly signed in, and it was accessible. He jumped up and screamed. His right arm was bandaged and healing, but it didn't matter. His scream got everyone's attention, including the doctors, and they all ran into his ward thinking something terrible had happened. He asked the doctors how much their bill was, and they told him. He assured them he would be back the following day. He dashed out, headed to his mom's ward, and wrapped his hands around her. He shared the good news with her, and she was elated too. Jack demanded a withdrawal of all his savings. The request was granted after he was able to verify that he owned the account. After 12 hours, his earnings were sent to his mom's history, which he had linked as his beneficiary. The following day, he cleared all their bills, and they were still left with a considerable amount to establish his mom, just like he had envisioned. The mom was admitted after a week. Jack resumed school and had access to his clients who had missed him. They started working together on new projects while Jack's mom quit her job as a janitor and started her own business. Jack's bullies stopped bullying him too. They were able to get a mini supermarket for his mom in a commercial area. Both the autist guy and his janitress mom lived a better and happier life ever after.